You're watching HCAM Live.
Good evening, HCAM, and what, Bob, you messed me up on my opening. Good evening, Hopkinton, and welcome to our Wednesday edition of the Hopkinton Hangout Hour, the live chat show where we talk about all things concerning Hopkinton, and we are glad that you are along. If you have any questions during the show, our guest this evening is Dr. Carol Kavanaugh, our Superintendent of Schools, for another Ask the Superintendent segment. So if you have any questions, please feel free to put them into the chat on Facebook or on YouTube, or you can just email them to us at jim@hcam.tv, and we will include them. And we thank you very much for being here. So, Dr. Kavanaugh, welcome back to the Hangout Hour.
Thank you. I feel like it's been a while, but I'm really happy to be here tonight.
I know, it is really a different vibe when different from when we were in the thick of things and you were figuring everything out and you were here every week with like tons of questions because nobody knew what to expect. That was a very amazing time for us, and one of the really affirming programs that we did because so many people contributed and received information through that, and that's what we live for. So it's been great to have you along.
Well, it feels good that it's not July anymore. I'll say that.
I know. Isn't it really interesting that even with the way things are going and what people did over Thanksgiving, which I'm not going to get into, but even with, as Dr. Fauci talks about, a surge on top of a surge, even with that, don't you think there's a feeling of relative calm when you consider what's been happening in school systems?
I do think so. And, there are people who are wondering, well, why are you remote this week? Is it because you have that sort of panic in your heart? And the answer to that is absolutely no. We started talking about this maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago. And we considered a couple of things. One of those things that was really important to us was the governor's travel order. So, people like to travel and be with their family and friends over the Thanksgiving holiday, but upon their return, they would need to be tested. So in that situation, we were really not sure how many people were going to be able to come to school, never mind, just willing, but there's that whole thing about you're just not allowed to do it until you have a negative COVID test. And then the other thing that we wondered about, and this really came in with really nice collaboration, I think, with the Department of Public Health, with Sean McAuliffe and Casey Morrow in town. So, thinking about the incubation period, if there were people who were, eating and masks off and kind of, really socializing with family and friends on Thanksgiving, if you look about a week out, and people might start testing positive, these would be the days that would be happening. And one of the things I always worry about is we have kids who are considered to be close contact. So a child who's done nothing more than come to school, but maybe sat next to a student who has tested positive. At the elementary levels, that's not such a big deal because we can take a whole class and just say, you'll be remote for however many days, and then bring that class back while the rest of the school functions normally. But at the high school, for example, it's very challenging because a student could go to English class, math class, science class, social studies, and create 4 or 5 close contacts in each one of those places, or maybe just one, or maybe none. But at the end of the day, after we think about lunch and busing and all of that, we could end up with 30 kids who have to sit home just because they're close contacts. So really, that was the second reason why we shut our doors this week.
And I'll tell you, I don't know if you have like a special line in to Dr. Fauci or anything like that, but I'll be honest with you. I really understood it. You surveyed the school community to see what was going to be happening over the Thanksgiving break. And with that information, decided that it was best to take a week to see if there was any type of outbreak. And I'll be honest with you, I said, why 1 week when they say you have to quarantine for 14 days? And then just this past week, the CDC is talking about reducing the length of time that you need for a quarantine. And now they're thinking like they're recommending in certain situations from 7 to 10 days. And if you think about Thanksgiving, 7, 8, 9, 10, that's 10 days before school starts. So I think that you would get a pretty good indication by then if something was arising.
Yes, and it's hard to know if today's, I'm sure the whole world knows that today was the day that we had the highest count ever in the United States. I'm sorry, in Massachusetts. So, you get to that place where you say, is that a result of Thanksgiving? And that's really the kind of planning that we had done. So when we had 4,613 cases today in Massachusetts, I don't know if that's a result of Thanksgiving, but logic would dictate that it was. I don't have scientific evidence. And that's really the kind of thinking that we were doing as we planned around this. So hopefully by next Sunday, if there's sort of a preponderance of positive cases as a result of Thanksgiving, we'll know who those people are, and those will be people who learn remotely while their peers will come into school. So yeah, we're hoping that our science works out. But
right. Actually, I want to talk about that next. But while we're still talking about this break, I had heard that there had been some thought or some people thinking that perhaps we weren't coming back to school on December 7th, that perhaps there may be another week. Was there a discussion around that?
At times you always have conversations about should it be 1 week, should it be 2 weeks, but we're ready to come back on Monday, December 7th. Yeah. And I'm excited to do that. I mean, we have, I say it all the time. Every time I say it, I knock on wood, but we have no evidence of transmission of the virus in our schools. So on Monday, if, we don't have the problem of the travel order and we don't have, sort of that risk of lots of kids testing positive and then having the close contacts, I think we should be able to reopen our doors and sort of do business as typical. I wouldn't say usual, because if it were usual, we'd have 1,000 kids in the high school,
Well, let's talk about that for a second, because things have gone really well this first, almost half of our school year. Why don't we all come back now? All the kids.
Well, you are asking a question that many, many parents will ask of me very frequently. When are you going to reopen the schools and, get rid of this sort of hybrid model and invite all students back? And they'll say that, rightfully so, there's been no transmission in the schools. And they'll also say that in European countries, 3 feet is the standard. But they'll also but science will also tell us that we really shouldn't be eating in close quarters like we used to. So, that is one of the things that sort of precludes it. But when you look at the 4,613 count today, I don't necessarily know that I or lots of other parents, there are a lot of opinions. I'm sharing one group's opinion, but there are a lot of opinions that would say you absolutely can't do that, and you can't do that now. They're predicting that December and January should be very, very difficult months with the coronavirus. And so, we take that into consideration. But one of the things that will happen at the December 17th school committee meeting is we'll start talking about putting together a group of people to think about what it really might look like if we were able to return all of our students, but that certainly wouldn't be until, probably springtime months. Another thing that I think people don't consider is that to prepare our schools physically to reopen our doors, where we are right now, we had to literally move hundreds of teacher desks and chairs and put all kinds of, signage everywhere, and take our cafeterias and plexiglass and athletic centers and gymnasia and all of that kind of stuff. All of that would have to be undone. So what custodians spent several weeks doing in the summer, we would have to see if we could undo somewhat quickly. So when you think about things like, could that be done over February vacation, for example, with an anticipation of March reentry? I don't know the answer to that. And, I'm just throwing that out there as an example of the time you would need to do it. But I think there are maybe about 53 classrooms in the high school. And if you had to return half of the furniture to them, we're talking, close to 700 desks that would need to be moved and That doesn't happen very quickly, and it doesn't happen in 5 schools. We're just talking about one right now.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, this is something I've been wanting to ask. I find this very interesting. You were interviewed for an episode of HHS Today. And during that interview, you just happened to make the comment that many school systems were only bringing back students for 40% of the time, but Hopkinton was bringing their students back for 50% of the time. And that was like a real interesting piece of information for me, because that shows that there are different models that reach different percentages. Do you think the next step from 50 is 100? Or is there a step in between where it's like 60 or 75 or something else?
All right. So I don't usually do this, Jim, but I'm going to show my cards. um, one of the things that we have actually talked about, and we've talked about it at a 30,000-foot level, if lunch tends to be a real obstacle, because kids will have their masks off, and given the populations of our school and the size of our cafeterias, our kids would really have to be eating almost elbow to elbow with their masks off. So that's concerning. But what we are hearing from, you know, different, scientific sources, that if they look at the 1 meter, so to speak, that's been successful in Europe, they're alleging that we could probably do that in our public schools in the United States as well. So one of the things we've thought about is, so let's just choose the high school kind of arbitrarily. The high school has a 7-period schedule, but 2 drop out each day. So I'd call it a 7-drop-2, so 5 classes meet. What would happen if 4 classes came in and the kids all met in a row, hour, and then everybody went home, and you had, say a 90-minute period of time to travel, time to get some lunch, and teacher prep period could be built in then, and then 1 more hour that would be held remotely at the end of the day. If the schedule continues to rotate like it does, it would be a different class that would be held remotely each day. And that way there we could eliminate the lunch problem. So, that is something that we're thinking about. I don't think that we're in a position right now to say, let's reduce 6 feet to 3 and just say that arbitrarily. But so I guess to answer your question, there are models that eliminate some of the problems, but bring kids back every day. And that's that kind of middle point between, now we're at 6 feet and everyone comes every other day, to welcome back, everybody, the doors are open, because I don't think we're there at all.
Right. And I wanted to say, I think that's really, really neat that you revealed your cards like that, because it is not, oh, this is going to happen. But what this shows is that you are thinking about everything, and you're looking at all the possibilities, and you're looking at the science that's happening, which I find really interesting. The 3-foot thing, because I know that, remember when it first started and it was 6 feet for everything, but then it was discovered that that was science from the 1950s, and the droplets that can be carrying the virus are smaller, and they can travel up to 30 feet. Right. So then I was thinking, oh man, 30 feet, that's just so hard. And I am wondering, I am no science knowledge at all, but I'm wondering if the key really has been the masks, keeping the virus from getting out, and the masks, and you can't even turn around without hitting a sanitizing station. So sanitizer on your hands, which touch things, and masks for your breathing. I wonder if, what percentage of protection that is versus the 6 feet or the 3 feet or the 30 feet. I don't suppose you have any knowledge on that.
No, but from everything that you read or hear, people will tell you that the mask is the secret to success. It really is. And I'm sure that right now there are parents who are out there listening, or, who knows, just people in the community who are thinking, my gosh, if they go to 3 feet, I will not let my child through that door. Like even today, I will have parents who will email me saying, the numbers are so high, I think you should close the doors. So I do hear from a lot of unique, different voices in the community, and they all make, in some way, they all make sense. So yeah. I think we have to always make that decision based on the science, the data in front of us, the day of the week, the time, where we are. And so that's why we're kind of sticking with what's working right now, because it's working.
You certainly can't please all the people all the time. Now, I find interesting, I was reading today that someone, I think it was the Massachusetts Medical Society, they reported it or they did the survey, and there were a significant percentage, I want to say about a third of people they surveyed in Massachusetts who would be very hesitant about taking a vaccine at this time, for whatever reason. And I respect the individual's thought process on that, whether I agree with it or not. But I'm just wondering what you need to do to take, like, how do you take that type of information into account when decide? And I know we're still a couple months away. I'm just so excited about the vaccine. I think about it all the time. How that information of percentage of people who may be vaccinated, will you be able to know through Sean and through the Board of Health what percentage of Hopkintonians have taken the vaccine and how that might impact your decision making?
I don't know if I'll know what percentage of residents in Hopkinton will have taken the vaccine. Sean is a font of information, so he'll share that 160,000 doses of the vaccine will be coming to this place by that date, and those kinds of things. So he really does have an awful lot of information. But you hear from varied sources. So, for example, this morning Dr. Fauci is saying April, May. This evening you're watching a different news broadcast, and someone will say by July it should be perfectly accessible. So it's really hard to know. And I guess given the number of people who have had the virus and survived the virus, it seems to me that there's good herd immunity being built, and I mean, there's just a lot there, and I think that's what I mean by the day of the week and the time and where we are, because maybe on March 1st we're going to be a place where we say things are so controlled you can reopen your schools, and maybe we won't get to that place in this school year. It's hard to say.
Right. So right now, we're back on December 7th, and we're doing the status quo for the foreseeable future.
That is correct. One slight change is that the public health officials now have an app that will be goes right on your phone, and it will be for all faculty, staff, administrators, students, families. And each morning, you'll read through a set of questions. And I think the questions aren't going to surprise anybody. They'll ask questions like, have you traveled outside of Massachusetts? Are you feeling well today? Do you have any of the following symptoms? Those kinds of questions. But what they think is, if you have to answer those questions every day, they will be top of mind. So sometimes there are people who say, yeah, you know what? I really hadn't thought about that, but I have had this little sore throat for the last couple of days. And then we say, yes, and now you're COVID positive, and I think sometimes you just need that little reminder in the back of your head to say, maybe I shouldn't go to school today, Yeah.
And
so
that's called the attestation.
Yes, it's done by Health Track, and families and teachers should be getting an email tomorrow from Health Track, as teachers tomorrow from Health Track and from the schools, and then on Friday, families. And that, I mean, it's really coming from public health, but obviously I'm the conduit to get that information to people.
Right. And when you complete that attestation on your phone, that information goes somewhere. It's not just to remind you, it actually goes somewhere.
It does go somewhere. So in the event that you said, yes, I've traveled out of the state, and so you somewhere in the Department of Public Health would have, sort of a yellow spot or a red spot indicating that you should not be in school because you checked a particular box. So I think the colors are green, yellow, and red. Red is what you don't want to be in school if you've got a red box. But
Okay.
Casey and Sean have been working on this for a very, very long time.
Okay. Now, to this date, do we have an example of someone becoming COVID positive through contact within the buildings of the school?
Not No, we don't have any evidence at all of or transmission of the virus in school. Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
we'll learn that someone had a pajama party on Saturday night and, they slept sleeping bag to sleeping bag. And yes, and
Yeah.
all the kids who were at that party are now close contacts, but not inside the schools, no.
So it's been a little bit different in colleges. We've heard about a lot of transmission within colleges. Now, in your sphere, have you heard of our other school systems kind of tracking along with how Hopkinton is doing? Or have you heard about school systems that have had outbreaks within their schools?
So the only place where I have heard anything along those lines, some of the school districts in the Metro West region are using, that kind of preemptive testing where they'll test, a large pool of kids. And one of the schools did say that they had found that a group of kids that are all, in the same, say, science class or something together had tested positive. But, for me, and maybe that is where they all got it. It was working together in that science classroom, and it's hard to know. But other than that, I really have not heard of other schools telling us that. I think maybe Dedham, Medway, and Wellesley are all people who are using that sort of widespread testing. The rest of us are not. And recently, DESE put something out that said, if you want, we can get you rapid tests and you can test kids in school. Obviously, parents would have to give permission, but you'd only administer the rapid test if a student was showing symptoms. And if a student was showing symptoms, we would immediately send that student home anyway.
Right.
So
right.
it might confirm
yeah.
positive.
Yeah.
But with a rapid test, a negative doesn't always mean negative. So we didn't feel good about that.
Yeah. Yeah. What you gain in speed, you give up a little bit in accuracy.
Correct.
So I have no other experience, but when I listen to what Hopkinton has, $100,000 worth of plastic, I believe in the high school alone, or maybe on the building, you're fogging every building every single day, has to be thousands of hand sanitizing stations and wipes everywhere you go. Are we an outlier in these types of precautions that we have, or is that kind of the standard or the norm for our area?
I think we might be, I would like to say we're a little head and shoulders above the rest. One of the things that, other districts have done is they've had kids come in Monday, Tuesday, and then Thursday, Friday, and they had said at the beginning that Wednesday was going to be their deep cleaning day. I mean, when we say deep cleaning, we very often mean that we're doing all the touch points and disinfecting. And we have our custodial staff doing that all day, every day in our buildings, to the point where we're almost dialing it back a little bit because it feels like it's excessive at this point. We're not seeing transmission. So I don't think we need to touch that doorknob 15 times a day. It could be 10 and things should be all right with that.
Right.
One thing that I think people might find interesting is that as we've been preparing, so we're obviously working on the FY22 budget as well. And as we're doing that, we don't know what the PPE demands are going to be next year. So in hand sanitizer and paper towels and those kinds of things that are consumable, they'll just be gone at the end of the school year. Right now in Mr. Person's, our director of facilities budget, there's $187,000 worth of PPE. Will that be necessary or will it not? We don't know, but that's a huge variable when you're planning a budget.
Right. We were talking about the attestation form, and we have a question about that. Somebody's asking us, is there a way to show that you have complied with the travel order from Marissa? Thank you for watching, Marissa.
So what I think would happen is because the information goes back to the public health officials, they are the people who get your testing results. So the information that you had traveled, as well as the information that you had tested, would be in the same place.
Yeah. And I do think that a lot of the form is exactly what you said. It's to keep it top of mind. It's to remind you. On the last episode of HHS Today, we did a segment on washing your hands and, using the sanitation station and keeping your masks on. And it's all the stuff you already know, but it's just reminding you of it so that you think of it. And I think the way I look at it is the attestation helps to keep honest people honest. So it's not, oh, I just didn't think of that. I know people in a particular generation who I'm not going to name who would say, no, I am doing really well. Actually, my wife is a pediatrician. So she goes in, she gets the full garb, and she's had patients come in and they had traveled over Thanksgiving. And so she said, you have to quarantine. And they're like, well, we are quarantining. But my wife is like, but you're here. So they just, people just literally it's not ill intention, but they're not thinking about it in the way. And something like that helps keep it top of mind, as you say.
Yes. I think, the same thing is true when you said you can't turn around without bumping into a hand sanitizing station at Hopkinton High School or any of our schools, really. I think, and so when kids see it, they just instinctively put their hand out and put more sanitizer on.
Yeah.
I think that's actually helpful because again, it just triggers your thinking.
Right. And they announce it on the intercom, and I see all the kids come into my class and they go as they come in the door. One thing I just wanted to quickly mention, because I'm now doing a virtual TV club at the middle school, and I just wanted to give kudos to the middle school because they have, I believe, a higher percentage of students who are full remote as compared to the high school. And they are constantly looking for ways to keep those kids who are fully remote part of the HMS family. I have several kids who are full remote who are part of my TV club, making segments and being involved. And I just think that it's a wonderful, wonderful thing that they're not being, forgotten. They're always being counted and they're always being invited. And I don't know if you have any stories of that, but I just think it looks great.
No, I think that's really important. And at the high school, we might be under 9% of the students who are remote. And, that was one of the things that we kept thinking about over the summer is how do we ensure that our remote students feel like they are still part of our community? Because at some point, we're all going to come back. And we just want to make sure that everybody feels like they're still part of the Hopkinton Public Schools, regardless of which learning plan they chose.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have a guy in my department who's so funny. His philosophy is, I just want to live. I just want to live. And I know we all, and it's so important. It's so important as exuberant as I can be dreaming about a vaccine soon. It's so important to just be like, we can do this. We have enough science and enough time of learning. We know what we have to do. And we can do it, and we can get through this.
Yes. And if windows are open in the buses or windows are open in our classrooms and you've got those extra sweatshirts on, I mean, there are some little pitfalls along the way, but you know what? I think it's all worth it to be able to have kids out in their classrooms, seeing their teachers and whether even if they're seeing their teachers remotely, it's just wonderful to have school,
Yes. Yes. Yeah, I agree. And you know what? If you do have to deal with, windows open in the bus, you know what? It's not World War II, and it's not going to go on for 6 years. So.
No, but you've got your coat on and you're young.
I know, exactly.
Old people like us, Jim, who get cold.
It's awful. Oh, anyways. So one last thing, because I wanted to get this, because I'm just curious about this. The largest gathering would be in the cafeteria or in the athletic center where people are having lunch. So, and I know the school has beefed up the ventilation systems to be able to screen any airborne virus. And I know that where we have windows, we're keeping windows cracked and doors cracked and letting fresh air in. In those large areas, are there fans? And do you know, would fans be useful? Because I always wonder, is it good for fans to move air, or is it just moving any airborne virus around? And I don't know if you know that.
Well, that's interesting because we had, and this is where, I keep talking about 3 feet, 6 feet. We had a very interesting webinar out of Harvard University today. And this person, Professor Allen, who is sort of foremost in some of the rules around COVID, especially with ventilation, had said fans are excellent if what you're using them for is to bring fresh air in from the outside. So you just keep pushing in. So on the school bus with the windows being open, it just keeps bringing in nice fresh air. It's excellent. He says you don't need even 3 feet in those buses. Just put the kids in them and open the windows. He has no problem.
Uh-huh.
But
All
one
right.
thing that would be a lousy idea is if you had a closed up room, no external way to bring in air, and you just blew the fan around. That's a very bad idea, because the longer human beings are in there, the more COVID droplets there are in the air, and you don't want to push them around.
Okay. All right, well, Dr. Kavanaugh, thank you so much for spending this half hour with us again. Always enjoy it.
I always do too. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
All right, and I'll talk to you soon.
You will.
And thank you all for joining us on the Hangout Hour. And please tune in next time for our next episode. Have a great night, everybody.